Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Indian Energy Minerals Forum, webinar number 4, Tribal Opportunities in the New Energy Market, Blue and Green Hydrogen in Indian Country. My name is Alex Krauka. I am a consultant for USEA's Consensus Program. The Consensus Program, for those of you who don't know, was founded in 2008. It is a cooperative program with the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. And the program seeks to educate the public, policymakers, industry, and other stakeholders and build a consensus on the wide array of benefits of carbon capture, utilization, sequestration, and carbon management technologies, as well as various adjacent technologies such as hydrogen. We try to build this consensus through briefings such as the one that we're having today in non-COVID times. This would be in our Washington, D.C. offices. We also have workshops, both in person in normal times and virtual during COVID times. We produce a series of reports as well as monthly news clips. If you are not subscribed to our mailing list and would like to do so, please email my colleague, Michelle Littlefield at mlittlefield@usea.org. A quick logistical note, we will hold off on questions until the end. However, if you do have questions, please submit them in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as possible. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our event page in the coming days. So please just give us a few days and the recording and presentations will be posted. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mike Moore to give a more in-depth introduction into the agenda for today.
Alex, thank you very much. And I'm really honored to be able to run and work with Steve Gray and Derek Watchman of Sagebrush Hill Group on these series of webinars that they've been putting together, and we've been hosting with them. And it's, as always, they find some fascinating insights and areas to cover when it pertains to Indian country and opportunities. Highly recommend those that have not seen these before that are watching today to go back through our archives and look at the previous ones that they've had and stay in touch for the ones that will be coming up in the future. It's incredibly informative, and some of the best experts in the land are working this with them. And I, again, would going to thank Derek, you and Steve for being here with your work and the insights that you provide us. I do know from discussions with people I know that have watched this, there have been a lot of new revelations about interactions and opportunities with tribal lands that they had not thought of. And so whether you get it firsthand or indirectly, you're making a difference out there with these webinars. And so thank you. And I'm now going to be quiet and turn this over to Derek and let you have it, sir.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Alex, and good morning, everybody. My name is Derek Watchman, and I'm president and owner of Sagebrush Hill Group LLC. It's a small Navajo-owned tribal affairs, energy, and economic development company. And so we've been fortunate to be involved, and we're working through the United States Energy Association, USEA, and the Department of Energy through their fossil energy group. And we've been tasked, Steve Gray and I have been tasked, as been stated, to put together a series of webinars on tribal energy. And so Steve and I have been in the field for many, many years. I've done other things, but tribal energy, in our opinion, is the heart of many tribes, their economies, their job base. And so, given the recent change in the movement toward clean energy and carbon reduction, we were engaged to get some conversation going on tribal energy and what are the opportunities out there, especially for those tribes that perhaps are still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. I know Steve and I are very aware of conditions here on Navajo. The Navajo Nation, for the most part, was created and has been operating off of resources from oil, gas, and coal. And so, in terms of what's in store for our nation and other tribes that are carbon-based dependent, that's what we're been engaged to do. But today we think it's a good topic, and that is hydrogen. I've come to learn. I'm more of a business person and financial guy, but in the last couple of months, I've come to learn that hydrogen, blue and green, are potential resources for tribes, especially those that are looking for alternatives. And the bottom line that I think many of our viewers don't know is that tribes, for the most part, are corporations, they're governments, they're everything all in one. And so our tribal leaders, when they do represent us, their jobs are obviously to run the tribe, run their tribes, make sure the tribes have enough revenues, and make sure that our tribal people, have the benefits and the programs, education, health, and welfare. And so, a government and a corporation all in one. So that brings, in my opinion, huge responsibilities for tribal leadership, tribal businesses, and for folks like Steve and I. How do we continue to grow the economies? And so today's discussion, I'm happy to say, is going to be important, and blue, and we'll learn more about blue and green hydrogen. But I'd like to turn the time over to my counterpart, Steve, and him coming out of the Four Corners area. He's been doing a lot of work. And so, Steve, good morning, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Derek, for that introduction. Thank you, Mike. As was mentioned, we have a great lineup today to talk about something that 2 years ago out on Indian country, it wasn't well known. It was something that people, heard about, but they didn't. So here we are after a major pandemic, and that especially really impacted tribal lands, impacted economic development, impacted jobs, that we're now in this area of trying to find other means and to what we can restore our industry back to. Plus, we have a new administration that's very focused on clean energy. And so along with all of these things, as we have said before, there are opportunities. And our job, we feel, Derek and I, along with USEA and the Department of Energy, is try to link the tribal communities with these opportunities that industry is looking at out there. That's a big part of what we're trying to do, is link them together. And as we facilitate that and continue the dialogue, we think that is just so important for everyone. In my capacity, I'm located in the Four Corners region, in a community called Farmington, New Mexico. I am the chairman of the board for the Four Corners Economic Development Group. We have a little over 5,000 companies in this region that we deal with. Our neighbors right across the river, which again, Derek is part of, Dene Chamber, has a little over 6,000 members of companies that they work with. So in our region, we have a very good mix of different entities in this area, in the Four Corners. It's also known as what people refer to as the San Juan Basin. And the San Juan Basin is one of two basins in New Mexico. And it's been primarily known for years because of its ability to extract coal and generate power. So we have two big power plants in the region. We had three on a Navajo, that one shut down. And so we have a large base of coal seams in the region. But another part of the region that we have a lot of natural resources is oil and gas. And that's been here a little longer than the coal extraction business has been, but it's been big, and it's been a very big contributor to the state of New Mexico over the years, as far as their revenue each year that they get. Most people, when they hear New Mexico oil and gas, they refer to the southeast corner of New Mexico, whereas the Permian Basin is located. We're just in the opposite corner of the state where San Juan Basin is located at. As this transition occurred, as we started talking with businesses, all these things that I mentioned, as we started to put this picture together and say, what are we doing? What can we do? What are those opportunities out there? Four Corners Economic Development started to listen to what the industry was saying. And they were saying there are these resources, and how you use them now is going to be very key. And so one of two of them that came up was helium. Another one was hydrogen. So we started to put our ear to the ground, started to talk to the industry, listen to the experts. What are they saying? What are they thinking? But we were also very intrigued with watching what is happening in the country. For years here in the basin, the San Juan Basin, our market has been California and Southern Arizona. And you say, well, why was that? Why is that market there? The market is where the resources to generate electricity or even move oil and gas was going. As you know, over 35 million people in California, big market. Down in the Phoenix Valley area, 5-6 million people in that region. So there were big, huge markets of where we were moving the resources of electricity and oil and gas too. And so they started to go through a transformation, particularly California, and looking at where are we going to go. And so, the industry's like, okay, we need to keep an eye on what's happening in California, and we need to look that way, but we also need to look internationally too. And just south of us, of Arizona, New Mexico is Mexico. And so people started looking there as well for these markets, but watching very carefully how they are starting to change, because that was very, very important. And we saw this area of hydrogen starting to emerge and starting to come out. And you can talk to a lot of the scientists and the engineers. It's been around. People are very familiar with it. But we wanted to look at industry and look at, okay, if we start to go this way and we start to make this transformation, we don't envision, like everybody out here in the West, it's not uncommon when you see a 2,200 or 2,000 megawatt power plant. It's very common. But people were like, I don't think that's going to happen again. We're not going to get at that scale. It's going to be a lot smaller as we scale. And so we started communicating that with tribal leaders, tribal officials, telling them, look, there is a new market that is coming about. We should keep our ear to the ground on this, and we should follow what the industry is doing and start to move that way. And so really that's one of the reasons that we identified that. But also from the government, the United States government, in the Department of Energy, it started to move in that direction as well. So we put one and one together, saying, okay, industry's talking about it, the federal government's talking about it, we're on the right path, and we should pursue that. And in this region, what makes it really ideal is we have plenty of that raw material. Like many tribal areas, you have that material, you have that resource there in your area. we're blessed because we've had big power plants in this area. So we have the ability to generate and to transport if we need to. We have water. We have 3 rivers that come into this region, and we have land. And a lot of this falls within the tribal communities. And then, of course, you have the workforce. And that's really what we were looking at. In order for tribal communities to continue to sustain themselves, you want to retain a talented workforce. If it goes away, if it goes to the big cities, it puts you further back because you have to retrain people in these different areas. So really that was a big area that we were trying to convince the tribes. You don't want to lose this valuable resource of the workforce. They're highly skilled, they're trained well. And then we found out as we started to talk with the people the experts in the hydrogen area, that transition from that industry of a skilled workforce over into the hydrogen community is not that difficult. It's not that difficult. And so we looked at that and we said, that's a really good plus. The other one is comparable salaries. We know that it's going to be up there in an area that's going to be comparable where people can make a decent living, because that's what retains people and keeps them in these areas, particularly tribal communities. So as we started to put this together, we started to look at all these, and then we of course, you're talking with industry, and this is really important. You want the tribal communities to talk with the industry people. You want to facilitate that dialogue. That's really important, okay? Because the industry will look at these things that I mentioned, like a competent workforce. And so again, we turned over to who could help do that, ramp that period up, and that's institutions. And in this area, again, we're blessed with a number of institutions. We got 4-year and 2 years. What was really unique and nice about all this is these institutions, they have high Native American student enrollments, which makes it ideal. Okay, so now you're just going into those institutions, you're communicating with them and saying, we're gonna need to ramp up. We're gonna need to transition as people leave one industry and move them over to another industry. And so, of course, that all comes down to economic and the creation of jobs. And that's what we were really looking at. So here in the basin, as I mentioned earlier, as I started out, we have plenty of coal, plenty of transmission lines, plenty of substations, and then we have the raw material in the region, which is really ideal. And so you start to put all that together, including the water. Now, water is becoming more and more valuable every day, especially in the West. So we started to hold workshops to discuss water, because we are in a drought. As anybody in the West will tell you, particularly in the Southwest, we are in a drought. So water has become a very key element. And the tribes, we tell them that water, most of you have water rights. You have access to water. These industries I talked about earlier, they all need water. In order to do energy, any type of energy, you need water. So they still got the water. And that's very, very important. So here we got a whole mix of things coming into the basin as you pool all these things, and then you start to tell the tribes about it, about this opportunity. And some of them have really started to move in this direction. And so today's series is really talking about I focused on that particular one off of a fossil fuel, but then there's the other side of it that's green. And we have a speaker that's going to talk about that as well, because that's important too. If you don't have access to the fossil fuel, but you have the elements of a green one, then you can do it as well. And so we wanted to mix the two because you can do it from both sides. And it just so happens here in this region, what we call the San Juan Basin, we're fortunate that it's fossil, you know. And if we go down to southern Arizona, southern New Mexico, people have a lot of sun down there, and that's where you go. So I wanted to give this little overview for everyone and set the tone of why this particular basin with these tribes have started it. But you know, because it can be applied to other regions of the country where our brothers and sisters are located. And we want them to see it. We want that dialogue to begin. And so Derek and I, our job is to help facilitate that and help you all communicate with that. We want to bring the industry and the technology closer to the tribal communities. And so with that, I will turn that back over to Mr. Watchman. Derek?
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Gray, appreciate it. Yes, the next topic is a discussion, dialogue on blue hydrogen. And so we're very fortunate to have Dr. Samath, and I'll probably mess up, my apologies for the pronunciation, but Mr. Samath Adagarla, and he is the Vice President of Program Management for BayoTech Hydrogen. And so Samath is responsible primarily for product delivery and supporting project execution. In accordance with their plan, Samath brings over 30 years of experience in portfolio management, business development, research and coordination. Samath joins the company from Chevron. He basically was responsible for projects ranging from 2 million to 200 million. And so Samath has an abundant experience working in Kuwait, working in the Gulf Coast, Los Angeles, and in other parts of the world. And so Samath has a mechanical engineering degree from Drexel University and basically specializes in oxidation of fuels. And so welcome, Samath. We appreciate you joining us, and I'll turn the time over to you. Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Derek, for that kind introduction. And, you know, it's interesting personally, my journey is also when you start saying from Chevron to where I am with BayoTech, it's going through the fossil fuel to the clean energy. And it's just a pleasure to be here today and to share a presentation. So as a prelude to it, let me share my screen and I just want to check y'all can see my screen now. Okay. Someone give me the thumbs up. Yep. Yes. Okay. So it's really, as I said, a pleasure to be here listening to Steve and Derek. What I'm going to be sharing today is more from the hydrogen perspective. We've been involved a little bit with Steve and the San Juan Community College. I've had an opportunity to visit the Navajo Nation land over there and an opportunity to look at. And so I'm going to put things out from a hydrogen perspective. Steve and Derek have how the Native American and Indian tribes out here can take advantage of it. So someone has to put all this together to create that program going forward. So without further ado, let me just go ahead and make this into a here, and let me move ahead. So let me start off with some basic hydrogen properties. I know this may be really common to everybody, but I thought just to baseline everyone, it may be worthwhile for me to just start with the very basics. So hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. But remember, this is when we talk about it, it's a universe. On Earth as an element, it's a very small percentage. That is in the hydrogen form that we would like it as an energy source. But then you start looking at the natural resources like Steve mentioned, right? You've got a lot of water. And if you look at the formula for water, it has H2 and O, and that H2 is the attractive part. And you look at natural gas that you have from underground rock formations that has carbon along with hydrogen. And again, we're interested in the H part of it. And so we have a lot of opportunity to utilize that and convert it into a hydrogen-based energy source. So some of the other properties that are really helpful, hydrogen is 14 times lighter than air. So why is that important for us? So in a process where we're generating energy and you look at safety aspects of it, hydrogen disperses very quickly if you have a small leak. So it doesn't confine itself, it's not a liquid, so it disperses fairly easily and gives a little less issues with igniting or having a problem with causing any issues with hydrogen air flames. Hydrogen has the highest energy content by weight of all known fuels, 3 times higher than that of gasoline. So makes it attractive, something we should look at. Now you start looking at some of the areas that you need to be aware of. And that's why this mixed bag of properties I did mention. It has a very wide flammable range. That is that it can cause a flame from when you have 4% to 75% of hydrogen. So it's a very wide, so you got to be aware of it and take the necessary precautions. At 29% of hydrogen in air when it's mixed, it is very easily ignitable. The amount of energy required to ignite that hydrogen air mixture is very, very small. And so again, one of the things that you need to be aware. And then getting more important is that as we transport hydrogen as a gas to different places as a fuel, you want to take advantage of the fact that it's a small molecule. So you can compress it and carry a lot of fuel. So as you start compressing it into higher pressures so that you have more fuel, you got to be aware that high pressures is always something you got to be careful about in managing. So when you compare hydrogen with 2 other more common known fuels right now, you have hydrogen with natural gas and gasoline, and you look at the NFPA diamond. On the top is an indication of the flammability. You can see it's comparable in flammability. Gasoline is a little less flammable than hydrogen and natural gas. And then you look at the health hazard, which is in the blue part of it. Hydrogen is less of a hazard than natural gas or gasoline. As I mentioned, the flammability in air, which is always given by the lower flammability limit versus a higher flammability limit, and those are the ranges. And you can see that compared to natural gas and gasoline, there's a wide range for hydrogen. Most easily ignitable. You still need a lot of hydrogen, 29%, just being a small molecule. You need to concentrate a lot of it to be able to ignite it, whereas compared to gasoline and natural gas. Flame temperatures, once you have a flame, is fairly comparable. That's all I'd say is the basic introduction to hydrogen, which I presume that most of you all were aware of. But I just thought it'd be good to just set everyone on the same baseline. So let me get into the hydrogen economy. And this, again, I'm going to throw out numbers here and opportunities just to give you a flavor of where the economy is going and what the whole global economy is looking at. So this one is an outlook from a number of sources on where hydrogen is going in 2050. We're looking at one specific application, which is probably one that we can measure fairly easily, and that is fuel cell vehicles. So these would be the future hydrogen-based automobile or mobility industry, cars, etc., that'll be powered by fuel cells. So if you look at 2050, right now, very limited in the United States with number of hydrogen cars and hydrogen gas stations. And if you start looking at it in 2050, if you're going to put in 1.2 million vehicles, 300,000 forklifts, that's going to be powered by fuel cells. And fuel cells essentially are through the hydrogen source of energy. And the similar story is in all different parts of the world, United Kingdom, Netherlands. And these are some of the primary drivers of the hydrogen economy if you read the news currently. There are big initiatives in all of these countries, and that's what's driving this future. It doesn't mean that those out here in the gray area are not going to take it on. It's a matter of, will they develop the technology, or will these countries drive the technology adaptation, and then the other countries will take it on and utilize it. So when you look at it in numbers, in 2050 outlook is 2.5 trillion annual revenue. And again, 30 million jobs. And if you just look at the sheer amount of green in the United States and North America, and there's going to be a big portion of it in here. 18% of total energy demand is projected to come from hydrogen. And more importantly, right, as we all are interested in cleaning up the environment and go towards clean energy, by the processes, by the fact that hydrogen does not have any carbon molecule attached to it, you're going to prevent about 6 gigatons of CO2 emissions. So great numbers. So closer to home, and again, this is something that very recently was published and initiated, is the whole hydrogen energy earthshot. This is the DOE and the Renewable Energy group. And so they have an initiative called the Energy Earthshots. It's really a all hands on deck call for innovation collaboration for clean energy. And, you know, Secretary Jennifer Granholm's. But first up in that, most important in those initiatives, is a hydrogen shot. And really, what I wanted to highlight is accelerating innovations and spurring demand of clean hydrogen. When I start looking at these innovations, this is another opportunity for job creation, because the whole hydrogen technology industry needs to innovate, which means it requires new ideas, new sources, and new people. This is 2050. Will I be around in 2050? I'm not going to be sure about that, but that's where this newer, younger generation is looking at what skill set should they take on, learn, adapt, and what areas of energy they should be looking at. And if they're interested in the innovation piece, I would say, hey, look at hydrogen. So what is this whole hydrogen shot looking at? So currently hydrogen from renewable sources, let's assume, costs about $5 per kilogram of hydrogen. The goal is to have an 80% cost reduction by 2050, which is you want to get down to $1 per kg. So that is a challenge. And as I go through the rest of the presentation, you'll see where we are and how BayoTech out here also is contributing towards reduction of that price. So let me just go back into hydrogen, and two things in this slide. One of it is what Steve mentioned. Hydrogen has been around for a long time. It's been used almost for a century, primarily driven on the right-hand side by the petroleum. So let me explain the slide a bit. So on the left-hand side, you have the diverse energy sources that can produce hydrogen. Not naturally, as I mentioned, hydrogen is not as an element that you can just take and capture and put in. You need to convert some of them. So it comes from natural gas, fossil fuels, and this is one of those areas that I know there's a lot of natural gas on the Navajo land, and that's one opportunity. Renewable sources, as someone mentioned, a lot of sun down in the south east part of the southern part of south of New Mexico, etc. So you got advantage of there. Nuclear, and then you have coal. And coal, there's something you'll hear is called carbon sequestration. And essentially, as I mentioned, when you look at these sources of fuel, apart from the renewable sources like natural gas and coal, you're generating a C and an H. What everyone wants you to do is sequester the C part of it. Capture it, not just get rid of it, but capture it and utilize it. And most of the C, when you do the oxidation, comes up as CO2 and CO. And so that's what the biggest thing that's driving. When you look at the transition that you talk about, blue energy to green energy. When you do all this carbon sequestration and you have a clean energy fuel, that is really going towards the blue energy. And then you have green energy when you take it from splitting the water, which is its H2O, there's no C in that, through solar or energy and generating hydrogen. Huge opportunities as a fuel cells, engines, energy storage. As I said, petroleum recovery in the 70s and 80s, there was this whole hydroprocessing that suddenly took up. Hydroprocessing, again, just by the word, is a lot of hydrogen that is utilized in it. And that still is one of the majority places where hydrogen is utilized. And then, of course, ammonia production. When you add nitrogen to hydrogen, you get the ammonia part, which is great for fertilizers. So those two giants were really adapting and utilizing the hydrogen. So the next slide is a similar slide to previous, but talks about the next generation of trying to make it clean. There's very few changes, separations from there, but I'll highlight that. So anything with fossil fuel in the future with a renewable hydrogen focus needs to have this CCUS, which is the carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Once you remove the carbon, then you can actually feed it to the grid, and here this electricity now generated is clean hydrogen electricity. If you can use that as your source of energy for all the conversions that we talked about previously, to convert any of the sources of hydrogen into providing, on the right-hand side, clean energy, then you have a complete renewable. And I'm sure the next speaker is going to put a lot of focus on this area, but just thought that's the difference between where we're going with. This is pure green hydrogen. Again, when you look at it, tremendous opportunity for using hydrogen in the industry. And what this means is, when you're looking at job opportunities, you're not looking at a narrow field of job opportunities when you talk about hydrogen. If it's going to be powering an economy that has all of these industries and businesses, you really have so much more opportunity if you're educated in hydrogen or you've participated in the hydrogen learning process to be valuable in any of these industries. So when you start looking at hydrogen applications developed, or what I said, developing, fuel cells we've mentioned, and fuel cells are going to be used in all of these transportation opportunities. I think we mentioned forklifts, buses, vehicles. You have the Toyota Mirai and a lot of similar vehicles. Trains are coming up, and that's a new area that's, again, starting to develop. And then this little thing, if you don't recognize it, is drones. The drones are one of the easiest ones. You just need a little bit of energy. You let them go for a few hours, come back, refuel them, and they're off again. The existing energy, hydrogen economy, agriculture, fertilizers, and energy and refining, hydroprocessing technology. Industry is another one where just providing energy to steel mills, iron mills. The other thing that, if you are familiar with some of these mills, in many cases they need reducing atmospheres, and reducing atmosphere is an atmosphere which doesn't have oxygen in it. And what better opportunity if you have hydrogen providing you the energy already to use hydrogen as kind of a blanket to prevent any further oxidation of those metals or the elements or the products that you're making out of the steel mills that are so necessary to be oxygen free. And then as you start tracking now aircrafts with hydrogen and fuel cells, again, this falls into this, is starting to become more and more of interest and developing. So let me baseline you on this busy slide too, and try to explain this in explaining what hydrogen can do and how it compares on a more practical basis when you're trying to fuel a vehicle. And the way we've approached this, and this is actually not I think it's a common way to do it, is when you look at different fuels, the best way to look at it is just take it as how much energy can each of those generate. So in this case is 1 million BTU of natural gas. So if you just took in the first one, natural gas and put in the car, which is very common right now, you have compressed natural gas stations around and you put it in, what you're going to generate is about 175 miles that you can go through with 1 million BTU. But notice that you're starting to generate about 390 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. Then when you go through a gasoline vehicle, and if you take 1 million BTU of gasoline, that number tends to 200 miles and you have 430 grams of CO2 again generating. Now, if you took a fuel cell vehicle on hydrogen that was generated from natural gas, you can go a lot longer, 255 miles, and you start seeing the reduction in the amount of CO2 that's generated. Now, again, this CO2 that's generated is primarily from the burning of the burners, but you take the natural gas and you convert it to hydrogen, you keep it, and that's why this is called from wheels to emissions, from well to wheels and emissions. So this is taking the entire life cycle of that natural gas, which is the proper way to look at total emissions. And then the green aspect of it, if you use it as electrolyzers and hydrogen, or you take from bio waste, animal waste, you can still, again, the hydrogen amount is going to generate the same number of miles, but now look at this great advantage of green hydrogen giving you zero CO2 or carbon emissions. So BayoTech, when we're looking at it, and just want to calibrate you now on where costs, this is just a little bit of an economic understanding where we feel that we have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, hydrogen cost solution. And so this graph on the right hand, on the bottom on the scale is really looking at price of natural gas. This is what natural gas is now provided, say, by New Mexico Gas, and we take it as dollars per million BTU. That's how we just calibrate it on the price, and you get it as terms, but just to give it on the same basis. And on the y-axis, we have the cost of on-site hydrogen, and we're talking about dollars per kg. So normally hydrogen is done by kgs, and you look at it from a cost. And this was, if I go back to a hydrogen shot, this goal was to be $1 per kg and making it affordable. So we compare where we are right now. If you use our BayoTech solution, and I said we feel that this is one of the lowest cost solutions for hydrogen in the market. We are in this grade, depending on the sliding scale of where or what price you purchase natural gas. We are looking at about $2.75 to $3 per kg of hydrogen. Now, the other competitors are right now, the manner in which hydrogen is provided is actually supplied is from large plants, big, huge plants. And we talk about the BayoTech solution, which is a small plant solution. And so you've got to deliver it a lot of miles. You can't have this right in the middle of the city. So you have it outside. And there's two ways you deliver hydrogen right now, in liquid form or gaseous form. And if you take that and you start looking at the cost of transporting that through vehicles, etc., and these tube trailers, then when you look at it, delivered gaseous hydrogens at about $10 to $14 per kg. And we look at a 200-mile range, and we're looking at basically 400 kilos capacity, which is what these tube trailers at the max can carry. If you take liquid hydrogen, you can keep that as 500 kg capacity. It has a 600-mile range, and you're looking at $8 to $10 per kg. Now, if you take electrolysis, which is that splitting of the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen, because it requires a lot of energy to split that water molecule into hydrogen, you're looking at $8 to $15 per kg. So look at all of these technologies and look at what hydrogen shot is, and you're looking at $1 per kg. You're talking of some serious innovation, some serious investment in jobs and talent, and also in really intellectual ability to be able to make this transition down to $1 per kg. And this is another, as I said, it's one of those opportunities close to my heart, having done a lot of research that people in innovation, and if I can, if there's anything to incentivize, the learning and the education and innovation, this is really one of those opportunities. So I'll go a little bit into BayoTech and what our solution provides and why it's different from. So BayoTech is on-site production. What we've done is taken those large units that exist in refineries and through innovation have made it into a small 40 by 60 unit. So you tell me where you need the hydrogen unit, we can then bring this unit in and place it over there. So now the hydrogen that you need is closest, the source of hydrogen is closest to the way you want to apply it. So one of the places we visited was down in Navajo Nation. Yeah, you got a piece of land that's about an acre. Sure, I can get my unit in with all of the other required things to compress and store, and within an acre of land, I can have this generating hydrogen, and this is 1,000 kg of hydrogen a day. And if you have to consider a standard fill up for a vehicle for a week, is probably around 20 kgs that you need for a week, 20 to 40 kgs, then you can understand what 1,000 kgs of hydrogen per day can do. And we are essentially using the natural gas pipelines and then bring this unit very close to the place and avoid any long haul transportation. So you have a lot of natural gas pipelines. We have our unit, we can generate hydrogen for you. But this generation of hydrogen in its current form is called gray hydrogen because you haven't really captured the CO2. Having anticipated that, and this is the capture of CO2 is a technology that we are getting into, but we said there are experts around who are actually specializing in carbon clean, which is capturing all of the CO2 and finding ways to utilize it. So with that, we've partnered, and you can see it on our website, Carbon Clean, which is a company that's going to do this carbon capture solutions. So thereby, you take what you have. So if you were doing this nomination, you have a hydrogen generation system with Carbon Clean's carbon capture system with appropriate utilization. Now you're talking about blue hydrogen that Derek was mentioning at the very beginning. What is our technology? Very standard. This technology, and in fact, to just emphasize what Steve Gray mentioned, this is one of the very old technologies, steam methane reforming. All you need is water, which you have. You have electricity, you're already generating it, and you have natural gas. And if you have biomethane or any other form of natural gas, we can take it. That's what we need in our technology. These three is input. The system that you saw is in that CCAN or the modules. We have a water purification system just to make sure the quality of water is standard for every place. We have a steam generator for startup. We have a natural gas cleaning system because some of the natural gas comes in heavy with sulfur. So we have a desulfurizer up there. And then all we have is a furnace, which uses natural gas to heat up and required for our process. So now that you have steam, you have methane, and you have heat, this is our technology, a steam methane reformer. Again, this is the innovation that is now reduced to a very compact size. It has a little catalyst, and it's just a tremendous innovation that then converts the methane, the steam, and the heat into initially CO, hydrogen, and steam. There's actually CO2, and then we complete the reaction with another step called the water gas shift reactor, which is again utilizes a catalyst and then produces the CO2, hydrogen, and steam. As I mentioned, the CO2 then, when we use Carbon Clean and other carbon capture, will just essentially give us the hydrogen. And then the hydrogen that we have, so that's one, if you capture the CO2 that's coming out of the stack, but then the hydrogen is also cleaned up with all of these through something called a pressure swing adsorption system, which is, again, one of those that's very common in refineries, a PSA system, and you can get 5 nines or 99.999% hydrogen purity in it. And so whatever is remaining, and we've separated out, goes back into the furnace to burn out. So everything that's coming out related to CO, CO2 will come out of the furnace. Everything you want from hydrogen that you want for your applications comes out of the PSA. So BayoTech, just so happy to be in New Mexico, based in Albuquerque, up on 8601 Alameda in the Northeast. And that's where the Center of Excellence is, where the R&D and innovative technology was developed. The original technology core design came from Sandia National Labs, and we have an exclusive license to use that. The application that Sandia developed this innovation was for sulfuric acid or some other applications, not for generating hydrogen. And Sandia National Labs had spent almost $50 million developing technology. I said, we've got an exclusive license, we've got a couple of the inventors, and then we took that technology and then innovated with new patented technology to produce and focus on hydrogen. And right now we are in the process of manufacturing the first units, which are 1,000 kg per day of hydrogen generation units. During this journey, it's been absolutely a pleasure to be working with two giants in the Farmington area that y'all are quite familiar with. Steve Gray and Alicia Corbell are one of those primary drivers, and their energy and enthusiasm as part of San Juan Community College is so just effective, and we are so happy to see them, because we look at this as an opportunity for us to help them as they develop the curriculum in the hydrogen economy. We see the benefit of them developing some really outstanding individuals whom we can utilize as we go ahead and grow in this industry. And same with PESCO. PESCO is our manufacturing partner right from the beginning. They've been with us from when BayoTech started its first need for any kind of equipment. BayoTech's been there, and I know this PESCO has a lot of opportunities for Native Americans, and especially the Indian tribes local to the Farmington area. And we are just absolutely, it's a pleasure to work with PESCO and partner with them in this journey. So in summary and in closing, I think I went through and I showed you that the hydrogen economy is growing, it's booming, the opportunities globally, the opportunities in the United States. And the way I look at it, it's got opportunities in your developing the natural gas, entire supply chain, including innovation, because supply chain not only doesn't include innovation, but here with all these opportunities coming out with innovation and hydrogen shot, there's so many job opportunities and skill sets that will be available if you want to take advantage of it. And locally, you have the education initiative at the San Juan Community College. Talk to Steve Gray on what they're doing with the curriculum. We just signed an MOU with them. I'm just thrilled to work with them. And the same thing with manufacturing. As we grow and PESCO will grow, and as PESCO grows and the hydrogen economy grows, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more growth for PESCO in the Farmington, New Mexico area that forms another opportunity for future jobs. So if I had to summarize, I think this is the time that Steve and Derek and everyone's putting their heads together, that you start developing a skilled labor force and you leverage your resources, and you'll be a big player in this clean energy hydrogen economy that's in the future. I have no doubt about it. And with the energy that everyone has around it right now, especially my little experience with Navajo Nation, it's going to be great. And I wish you much success in that area. That's all I have. And I again, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Very informative. And I like the presentation, so much appreciated. Thank you on behalf of Steve and I. And so let's move on. And I'd like to now welcome Dr. Laura Nelson. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate the time. We just had a very nice presentation on blue energy. And so we're looking forward to your presentation, Dr. Nelson. And just by way of introduction, Dr. Nelson is currently the Vice President at Strategen, and she serves as the Executive Director for the Green Hydrogen Coalition. Dr. Nelson, who I've known for many years, and it's good to see you again, Laura, has a distinguished career in energy industry spanning both public and private. Prior to joining Strategen, Dr. Nelson was the energy policy advisor to then Governor Herbert of Utah, and was a director for the Utah Office of Energy Development. And so Dr. Nelson has a long history in energy and has a PhD in economics from University of Utah. And so Laura, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know it was short notice, and so, but I know you missed the first part, but Steve and I have been tasked by the Department of Energy and USEA to engage in dialogue on tribal energy development. And so today we thought it'd be a good topic to talk about hydrogen, particularly those tribes that are highly dependent on fossil energy. What's their future? What opportunities do they have? Information that we've seen around is that Indian tribes, and they're still trying to value it, but Indian tribes for the most part have up to maybe 20% of the resources here in this country, resources on Indian lands. And so, the question is, at least in our opinion, is, how do you use those resources not only to benefit and create revenue, but to continue to grow tribal economies and tribal jobs? And that's the big focus for Steve and I, and looking at the sustainability for our tribes here in the country. And so welcome, Laura. And I know that I'm not sure who's going to do the proper presentation, but I'll turn it over to you, Laura, and welcome and good morning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Derek. I'll just check you can hear me okay? And I have my slide presentation open, so I'm actually sharing my screen right now. So I'm good to just advance my slides and
go ahead.
You all today. So you all can see my screen okay? Perfect. All right, wonderful. Well, it's great to be with you. I was a bit late joining, but I appreciated, I'm probably going to say it incorrectly, but Mr. Adagarla, I got part of his presentation and the work they're doing with BayoTech, very exciting. And his overview of some of the great work that Steve has been doing there with the college to really train the workforce. Steve and I have had some conversations around that. And certainly, Derek, thank you for highlighting the work that you and Steve and others are doing to create robust energy and economic opportunities for the tribe on a going forward basis. I've certainly been committed to those things throughout my career. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, which some of you may know. There's lots of construction, as you can see, going on in our state right now. And so, economies are really interesting right now in terms of where we see booms and where we see challenges. And resources play a big part in where we can see opportunities for growth and I think address challenges. And as Derek so aptly identified, we are in the midst of a significant energy transition today, driven by policies, driven by preferences, and I think in part driven by some new economic opportunities that are emerging. And the tribe certainly has access to a lot of resources, both resources in the terms of those that are naturally occurring, but also in terms of resources that they have built and secured and produced for other users, whether we're looking at transmission systems or, as Mr. Adagarla identified, pipelines. So there is a lot of infrastructure that certainly can be repurposed and reused as well, as addition to your people. Your people are, very committed to seeing the success of their tribe and those economic and those energy systems. And I think Derek and Steve, you are great examples of that. And so my career has been really focused on how do we create clean energy solutions and across all resources that work for everyone. And that means that we do have affordability, reliability, and resilience in our energy system, but we also create those jobs and investment opportunities for everyone. So that's just a little bit about me. But through my work and what I'll say is my passion, I was attracted to the Green Hydrogen Coalition. I've been with them about a year and a half now. They do have a very specific mission. They're 501c3, so they're a nonprofit. So we are an objective organization at heart, really focused on educating and driving momentum around a specific resource, and that resource is green hydrogen, but in the context of how that helps us to achieve some of those other goals that I mentioned, and one where we're accelerating that clean energy future. So we do focus on facilitating the policies and practices that will accelerate both production and use, as I mentioned, of a specific resource, and that resource is green hydrogen in all sectors where we'll create this clean energy future. Our approach is really to focus on projects at scale where we can simultaneously leverage those supply and demand opportunities. And I think that these projects can do a couple of things. One, they can be examples for what opportunities can occur within the tribe and for utilizing tribal resources, and they build the momentum to drive down cost. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But again, that was something that Mr. Adegarla, and I hope I'm saying that right, mentioned is, these cost considerations are significant and they must be addressed as we continue to grow this hydrogen economy. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, what we do at the Green Hydrogen Coalition and try to draw some, I think, relationships for the tribe and how I think that this can be supportive. We as an ecosystem have attracted a lot of different participants. These are our supporters. We don't call them members. They're really supporters of helping us to drive our goals as a nonprofit, and they cover the engineering space, the utility space. We even have financiers and attorneys and others that are really participating to help create the structures that we're going to need to realize a robust hydrogen economy in the future and achieve some of those goals that the DOE has recently laid out that were also mentioned in the previous presentation. So as already mentioned, hydrogen is a very mature economy today. The commodity is globally traded and about 70 million metric tons used for a variety of applications identified here on this particular graph. A lot is used in the refining space, for example, along the Gulf Coast in Texas, where they have hundreds of miles, in fact, of hydrogen pipelines, significant hydrogen storage for a lot of the refining capacity in that space. A small amount is used for transport. That's because the majority of transport today has been passenger vehicles, and we really haven't grown the kind of large fleet, maritime, and other large transportation applications where we could see additional use. So this is just a demonstration of what we're seeing in terms of use today, but it is a mature commodity. It's just that most of it is produced today with a carbon footprint. And I think Mr. Adegarla already mentioned that's gray or brown hydrogen that's produced either from natural gas predominantly or even from coal resources without carbon capture and sequestration. Only a small percentage today is what we would call green hydrogen, sometimes called renewable hydrogen, but we simply call it green hydrogen so that we can really capture a variety of technologies that can be utilized to produce hydrogen so that it does not have incremental carbon production in the primary production process. So this is just kind of a graphic that indicates that as you use different resources to produce hydrogen, that you have a different level of carbon intensity. And of course, nuclear can be used to produce electrolytic hydrogen, and nuclear power does not have carbon emissions associated with production. So that's another avenue. And at the Green Hydrogen Coalition, we really do consider those avenues of production. It isn't that we don't think that there's an important role for blue hydrogen. We think that we have to look at all of the opportunities, and we're just focused on specifically green hydrogen, which is hydrogen that is produced from non-fossil fuel feedstocks and does not increase greenhouse gas emissions during the primary production process, as I mentioned previously. So that's our definition, and where we think there's a lot of momentum for growth today and a lot of potential, and I think certainly some opportunities for the tribe to consider how it would utilize its resources, whether land, water, existing infrastructure, or other assets like solar or potentially wind assets that could be used to produce electrolytic hydrogen or hydrogen from other green hydrogen from other non-fossil based resources. Once produced, just like the hydrogen molecule that is produced today, that's what we might call gray or brown hydrogen, it's used in all those applications I indicated. A green hydrogen molecule does not look any different than a gray or a brown hydrogen molecule. So again, as in the previous presentation, you know, we absolutely need to look at how we can reduce those transportation costs, but we've really got to look at the production costs, because today green hydrogen is not cost competitive with other forms of hydrogen production, particularly those that are fossil based. But if we can get there, we're essentially going to provide for decarbonization of an already produced commodity, plus facilitate these multitude of multi-sector applications for hydrogen utilization. I mentioned the transportation sector today, where we've seen use in passenger vehicles, but what if we could really grow utilization in that sector as we grow the production of hydrogen that does not have carbon intensity that we see today? So in order to kind of facilitate and build this momentum, as I mentioned, we are focused on projects that can really lead to scalability, because we know from the past that as we scale resources, that the cost does in fact come down. So some of you on the call today may be familiar with the Intermountain Power Project. This is an 1,800 megawatt coal-fired facility located in Delta, Utah, that is being converted into a combined cycle combustion turbine that will utilize 30% green hydrogen on day one of operation, not in 10 years from now, not in 15 years from now, but actually in 5 years from now. So this next slide just gives you a bit of an overview of what is happening at this facility. And could something like this be replicated at other coal-fired resources? We believe absolutely it's the case. So as I mentioned, this is located in Delta, Utah. The facility has been in operation since the late 80s. It has significant off-takers today from that 1,800 megawatt facility. Many of that off-takers do live in California, where they have certain policy pressures which are prohibiting them from continuing to take energy from fossil-based resources. So back to when I was Governor Herbert here in Utah, we really started looking at what are the opportunities for conversion of this plant. And it really was based on partnership. And again, that's something I think that was really important from the last presentation. It really takes partnership and building those collaborative efforts to drive these kind of significant shifts and solutions. But we said, listen, there's a significant transmission asset already out there. There's land, there is water associated with this particular project as it exists today for the coal facility. The transmission system that's out there already integrates solar and wind today. In fact, the wind generation that's out there today is actually also contracted for in California. And we have a lot of potential participants, with a very large participant and off-taker in the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. So through a partnership, collaboration, and really, I think sometimes making some difficult decisions, it was determined that a best path for this facility would be to convert to a natural gas-fired plant that would also blend in green hydrogen, and that green hydrogen production would be available on day one of operation, scaling up to 100% over time. The current target is that it will be over a 20-year period that this facility will move from 30% green hydrogen to about 100% green hydrogen. So it will take time. The green hydrogen will be produced through an electrolytic process. That's the vision today. And it will take time to scale electrolytic production. Just to give you an idea, this will require about 5,500 tons of hydrogen to source that 30%. 5,500 tons is a lot. And so it is going to take a period of time to scale up, produce that hydrogen, and make sure that it's available for operation. So the great thing, though, is that this facility, again, taking this look at what are all of the resources in play at this particular facility and how can they be leveraged. This particular facility happens to be co-located with an elegant storage solution. Other storage solutions might apply, but this is the one really showing off for this particular site, which is that there are these very large salt dome formations in existence at the site. Each one of these salt domes can hold about 5,500 tons of, in fact, just a little bit over that, of hydrogen. And there's an opportunity to build over 100 of these salt caverns at this particular site. So the storage for the hydrogen is available. The land is available for the electrolytic production. The water is available. There are the zero emitting resources in place that can be used as inputs into the electrolytic process. So just to give a little bit of a sum up, what we have here is a situation where we would take power, either purpose-built solar or wind, or what we would call green power from the grid, which can be secured through contracts, put it into an electrolytic process where we would split water into its component parts, hydrogen and oxygen, and then either store that hydrogen or use it in a gas-fired generator. So it's what we call a power to gas to power solution for providing for a green dispatchable resource and energy storage on the grid, which can provide for stability in a rapidly changing energy economy. The other thing that occurs here, I mentioned repurposing existing resources, also repurposing jobs. This is located in a rural part of Utah. This economy is about 80% or more dependent on the operation of this particular power plant. And these are high-skilled, high-paying jobs that we think are very, very important to retain. So from the state's perspective, when I was working in the state, you know, we're not the engineers. We weren't the people who were going to come in, finance, develop the project, but we could inform on a policy basis that these jobs were important to us, that we wanted to provide a platform and avenues for realizing new opportunities to retain those jobs and retain the economic opportunities for this particular part of our state. And so we did put policies in place to do that. So I think it's about identifying what are the opportunities in the transition in terms of resource, and identifying, you know, what are the measures or policies that can help you to get there and attract the investment that can drive the economic opportunity. And that certainly is a lesson that we learned here. Now, one of the questions I get a lot, and I just went ahead and put this slide in, is, well, is this really economic from the storage standpoint? And actually it is. Today, salt dome storage is the most economic form of what we call long duration energy storage. It's already done today. As I mentioned, the Gulf Coast of Texas has a lot of hydrogen production, and they in fact use salt domes today to store hydrogen. It doesn't mean that other forms of storage shouldn't be used or aren't available. They are. In fact, you have thermochemical opportunities in the form of storage in chemistries such as ammonia, and also other geologic formations, which may be opportunities that possibly exist for the tribe, especially as you look perhaps at depleted natural gas wells as a potential option to explore for hydrogen storage. And I will say that this is occurring in other locations as well. So again, just kind of emphasizing that this is really a function of what resources are available, how can we best utilize and look at this holistically to create a new opportunity. And absolutely, we do know additionally, we've learned this from the past, that as we scale, costs do come down. It's happened for every new resource that we've really kind of put online, whether we're looking at solar, whether we're looking at wind, or even as we're looking at battery storage. And we believe the same thing can happen for hydrogen production that does not have the same carbon intensity that we experience today. So just quickly, as I wrap up here, we are, you know, of course, looking at this IPP plant to really be, I think, a model for what can occur elsewhere. We want to work across states to really identify what can work best for those states, and also provinces as part of the Western energy system. So we created an initiative to work across 11 Western states and 2 Canadian provinces to evaluate and assess opportunities for green hydrogen development in our region. And I know, I think I visited with both Steve and Derek about this. This is an important place, I think, to have these conversations. Would welcome discussing this with you further. We've also launched an initiative called High Deal North America to bring together the ecosystems that are going to be necessary to have the financing, the regulatory routes, as well as the engineering and technology drive to realize a green hydrogen economy. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on these initiatives, but just quickly, the Western Green Hydrogen Initiative, as I mentioned, is state policy offices and provincial offices coming together to identify solution paths forward, which certainly I think include opportunities that can exist for the tribes across the various states and provinces. Then on High Deal, we're really, again, looking at bringing together those key ecosystem stakeholders and strategically targeting specific locations so that we can bring those systems together. Our goal is to drive down the cost of producing green hydrogen to $1.50 a kilogram in less than a decade. Now, it's not the dollar that Earthshots is looking at through the DOE, but we really feel like this is a practical target that we can achieve if we all work together and find those engineering, financing, and policy solutions to do so. So we're targeting LA. We're working within LA to drive this as a first example of how we can achieve this. Again, we think this can be a replicable model that can be used elsewhere. So working on this in LA, we do see opportunities to replicate this in the West. For example, in my hometown, Salt Lake City, there's significant opportunity to replicate this model. We have power plants, we have a lot of solar resources, we have access to some biogas production that could be used in SMR, very similar to what was presented in the previous presentation that we consider to be a renewable pathway to green hydrogen production. We also have development of other economic activities, including an inland port, and we have existing mining operations. So we think there's a lot of potential here that could create jobs and drive investment. And I think if we look holistically, and as we look holistically at tribal opportunities, that we could create a similar map around what those opportunities could be. And Derek and or Steve, maybe you're already looking at this and would love to talk with you more about how we could support that effort. This is happening. We see projects being announced across the world. I think that there isn't any reason in my mind, if the tribe was interested and is interested in having a focus on green hydrogen production, that you are very well positioned to attract investment and to drive jobs in a way that works for you and works for your communities, because I think that each and every solution has to be specific to the communities and the people that are involved, as all of these particular solutions that I think are emerging today are. So as I mentioned, we are an educational nonprofit. We want to stay engaged and support you in your goals and targets. It's hard, to have as many conversations as are needed. So as a bit of a substitute, we provide a number of access points to get more information about green hydrogen. We created a green hydrogen guidebook. It's the only one I know of that exists. We'll be updating that in the coming year, but it is online and you can take a look at that. You're, of course, also welcome to watch our webinars, which are available on our website. And there we do quarterly webinars. We have announcements. If you'd like to sign up to get our newsletter or announcements, please do. We just love to stay in touch. And Steve and Derek, I know you both have my contact information, and I'll say that, we have lots going on. We're doing a lot of work to be an educational resource. We can't do it all. We do it really through the robust partnerships that we have with folks like Steve and Derek and the tribe. And we appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to work with you all in achieving what works for you and in your goals for looking at your resource opportunities from your fossil to your non-fossil resources, repurposing existing infrastructure, and really providing for that workforce development, those jobs of the future, and utilizing the workforce, the very skilled workforce that exists today. So with that, Steve and Derek, I'll wrap up. I think Derek, you're moderating. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen. There I go. And I'm happy to answer any questions folks might have too.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Great presentation. And, some of the things that I like to comment on is, one is that Steve and I are obviously trying to create dialogue for tribes to consider and look at different opportunities. As you say, it's got to come from the tribe, and we certainly know that. And with tribal development, in some cases, because of the trust land status of land, it may or may not create a few extra hurdles and access to financing, and that's probably a whole nother conversation. But just trying to bring forth opportunities for tribes, meaning the West. We've had representatives from Crow talk. We had Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara, MHA talk. We had a representative from Osage. And so those tribes primarily, are dependent and use also fossil energy resources to fund their tribes. And so, as you mentioned, as we're moving into this, as we enter this energy transition, what's in store for tribes? And so, but thank you. And maybe I'll turn it over to Steve and Mike to see if we have any questions before we conclude here. And so I'll turn it over to you, Mike, and any comments that you'd like to share with us, and then I'll throw it to Steve.
Wow.
Yes.
There's a lot here to digest. I've only begun looking into hydrogen not too long ago. I've been kind of in the CO2 and the EOR and the carbon capture community for close to 20 years. So I know that pretty well. There's a lot of hydrogen left for me to learn. Samantha, your earlier talk on the ability to move plants around with tech that could be mobile, could be incredibly useful in a lot of tight situations, of course, scale. But Dr. Nelson, your talk was very enlightening as well. I really didn't realize the depth of the work that's been going on to use hydrogen for power generation, the conversion volumes and locations. I kind of got a high level view of that over time, but incredibly insightful. So one of the things that I grapple with, and I know other friends of mine, as we try to understand all the moving pieces, is when you put stuff on a table and you try to compare apples and oranges and peaches and grapes, you're trying to all get to the same place. We struggle with this with CO2. What was a ton of CO2? Well, there's the long ton and the short ton. So it depends on if you're buying or selling. Depends anyway. So we got through that, and then there was the carbon and carbon equivalent and CO2. Carbon's a lot different. Carbon emissions are a lot different than CO2. There's issues on anyway, I won't go into it. So I'm sure that with hydrogen, you do the same thing. So we hear kilograms, and I think BTUs and cubic feet. So right out of the chute, my ability to do comparisons gets kind of chunked out the window. And it's, so is there a, how to do it? Samantha, assume you had begun to do that in one slide that you had. So cubic feet wise, what's a kilogram of hydrogen look like? I guess it depends on temperature and pressure. Well, it's still the same weight. It's just the volume would change.
So I think the challenge here is when you start looking at gasoline in liquid form, and then you have in gaseous form hydrogen, or you take liquid form of hydrogen and convert it to gaseous form, you got to come back with one form of baselining the units, right? We just utilize the natural gas, because if you looked at your electricity bill in your this thing, because that again comes through your natural gas, or your natural gas bill that you consume at home, it's all coming back in terms. And so that's why we end up using BTUs and terms, because those are just right there when you start comparing the energy generated by whatever source of fuel is. And that's why we stick with that. It's not a challenge just for you, Michael. It's for everyone out here. We get people who come in and they love to talk on SCFH. Some people like to talk on kg. Some people talk, and we're trying to create all of these cheat sheets that helps us maneuver from one place to another. So again, I think we just go with the form of saying energy equivalent from each of these fuel sources and what does it drive.
So, Dr. Nelson, on yours, the 5,500 tons of CO2 into a salt cavern, I understand salt caverns very well. I understand capacity and size. I don't understand tonnage in a salt cavern. Cubic feet. What is the hydrogen? Is it in a liquid form? And if it's liquid, is it super cooled, or is it gaseous? But it's still 5,500 tons. And then volumetrically, these salt caverns that can hold 5,500 tons, how big are they? I saw the comparison with the Empire State Building. It was a good visual. Again, this is on apples and oranges and all that.
So it's a great question, and I'll answer this way. One, I'm not an engineer, I'm an economist. And similar to Sumant, I mean, we really try to put the cheat sheets together. People tend to talk in tons, kg, or BTUs. And so this will be, of course, under pressure in gaseous form. Often it's, one of the big challenges we have today for transportation is liquefied hydrogen, which is an additional step and additional cost. And Sumant can probably talk a little bit more about that. It's on site, it will be used on site. So there are some considerations there. I will say that our green hydrogen guidebook answers a lot of those questions. To the extent that it doesn't, what I would request is please send us your questions because we're always looking to create education and information that can help folks to understand, all these different volumetric and measurement calculations. And we tend to end up using, simplified sort of notations on a regular basis because it's easy. Like for the power to gas to power, on average, you need about, 3 kilowatt hours of energy to produce 1 kilowatt hour of stored hydrogen. Why would you do that? Well, because you really need the storage, and it is the most effective way to store that. But then on the flip side, if you're using hydrogen in transportation, 1 kilogram of hydrogen is like 3 gallons of diesel. I think I've got that right, Sumant, you can correct me. So we tend to end up in casual conversations of having what I always call the 3-to-1 conversation. But I think getting everybody straight on the numbers is really definitely something important, and that we're up to at the Green Hydrogen Coalition, and making sure that that education is available so that we understand really what are the resources we're bringing to bear as we make these decisions. And Mike, I think you're on mute, and I'm gonna, I actually have to jump to get to another call, but I want to hear what you have to say really quick first.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm good. I'm going to take it over to Steve because I'm sucking up all the time here and I don't want to do that. But Steve?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Mike. We're almost at the end of our time period anyway, so we got about 2 minutes left. But
So
if you have one more question, go ahead and take it.
Yeah,
there's been several questions pop up on the Q&A, and there's a number of them in here. Well, I think due to time, we probably won't be able to get to them directly. I would suggest to the speakers, please take a look. I think you take a screenshot and see if we can get back to them later. We will have the contact information on the attendees list and go from there. Fascinating. I'm going to, again, Steve and Derek, fascinating as usual insights. And Dr. Nelson and Samantha, I'm a lot of things to think about that I hadn't thought about before, and especially some of the opportunities that Derek, you and Steve will have with the folks that you're interfacing with on a regular basis. So I'm going to turn it back over to Derek. Anything else you want to do, and then I'll turn it back.
Well, let's close out here, but I want to thank you, Samantha, for joining us, and Laura, great information. The primary focus for this session is just identify tribal opportunities, and we feel that hydrogen is one of several that tribes, seriously need to look at. And I know that tribes interface heavily with the federal government, Department of Interior, and Department of Energy, and so our goal here is to identify, especially if the tribes do have the resources in their area, and many do, access to water, access to the resources, the infrastructure, and the jobs and the land. And so we think that this is great information. So on behalf of the Department of Energy, on behalf of the USEA, and then of course, Steve and I, through Sagebrush Hill Group, we appreciate everybody joining us. And our next webinar is scheduled for July 7th. And that focus will be, that's webinar number 5. And we're going to take a look at some successful tribal energy projects that we've identified out there that lead into, you know, the new energy transition. And so again, we want to say thank you. I know everybody has to John here, and so thank you again. So we appreciate everybody. So we'll call it a day, and thank you so much. Have a great day and take care. Be safe, everyone. So long.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bet. You guys bet. Alex, anything you want to toss? We're done. Wrap it up. We'll see you all soon. And from the USEA to everybody, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Oh, this stuff will be available on the website. They've been recorded. Presentations, if they're authorized, we'll make those available as well for the speakers. And it's not firewalled or paywalled. You can get to it, so you can send the links out to people that were not able to catch your presentations or this program.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.